2 million records. A company once offered him $28 million for them, which he turned down. When he finally tried to sell them years later, he couldn't give them away. In 1948, a company in New Jersey pressed a disc of black plastic, 12 inches across, with a single groove spiraling toward the center. That groove, if you uncoiled it and laid it flat, would run about 1/3 of a mile. For 40 years, this was how the world kept its music. Then a better technology arrived, and the industry declared the black disc dead. Pressing plants closed. By 1995, the format was finished. A curiosity, a thing your parents used to own. Except it didn't stay dead. There's a record that was never even released. The man who made it spent the rest of his life trying to keep it buried. Today, 2 copies are known to survive, and one of them sold at auction for over £25,000, making it the most expensive 7-inch single ever sold. This is what people keep, and the secret world inside vinyl record collecting. Here's the thing nobody saw coming. When the compact disc arrived in 1982, it was sold as the future. Perfect sound, forever. That was the actual marketing. Cheaper to ship, cheaper to make, no scratches, no pops. The music labels loved it. Through the 80s and 90s, they let the old infrastructure rot. Pressing plants shut down or switched to CDs. By 1995, worldwide vinyl sales had collapsed to around 2 million units a year. A decade earlier, single albums had sold 10 million copies on vinyl in a single year. Now the whole format barely managed 2 million. It was, for any practical purpose, over. And then, around 2006, the number started going the other way. Not by much at first, but it kept going, and it's never stopped. Every single year since 2006, vinyl sales in the United States have grown, 19 years in a row. By 2024, Americans bought over 43 million vinyl records, outselling CDs in dollar value for the first time since the 1980s. In 2025, U.S. vinyl revenue crossed $1 billion for the first time since 1983. The format the industry buried became a billion-dollar business. So, who's buying them? This is the part that gets strange. A huge share of the buyers are young. According to FutureSource Consulting, about 60% of Gen Z consumers say they buy records. Most of them weren't alive when vinyl was a normal way to listen to music. They're buying it anyway. They want the physical thing, the ritual of it, the act of choosing a record, sliding it out, dropping the needle, and being unable to skip. Digital music made everything frictionless, and a generation that grew up with infinite frictionless music decided it wanted the friction back. But here's where the world cracks open into something most people never see. 2 copies of the same album can look completely identical and differ in value by thousands of dollars. To understand why, you have to learn the rules collectors live by, and the first rule is condition. Records are graded on a strict scale. Mint, near mint, very good plus, very good, good, poor. And the gap between one grade and the next isn't small. A first pressing of Pink Floyd's The Piper at the Gates of Dawn in mint can run $2,000 to $3,000. The exact same record in Very Good Plus, one notch down, drops to $600 or $800. One grade, a few %. Then there's the matter of which pressing you're holding. A first pressing is the very first manufacturing run, cut from the first generation lacquer. A reissue comes later, copied from a later generation of the master. And collectors have learned to read the secret signatures hidden on every record. In jazz, the Holy Grail is a Blue Note, first pressing from the 50s, cut by an engineer named Rudy Van Gelder in his own studio in New Jersey. He hand-etched his initials, RVG, into the dead wax. That's the silent groove between the last song and the label. Collectors hunt for those 3 letters, plus a little stamped mark shaped like an ear, plus a faint ring pressed near the center. Find them, and an original pressing of Art Blakey's A Night at Birdland can sell for anywhere from $2,000 to $8,000. Miss them, and a later reissue of the identical album is worth about $80. 2 records, nearly indistinguishable, separated by a few marks in the dead wax that most people don't even know are there. Once you know the rules exist, you start to wonder who plays this game at the highest level. Who takes this obsession further than anyone should? The answer starts in Pittsburgh. Paul Mawhinney was born in Pittsburgh in 1939. He bought his first record in 1951, a Frankie Lane single called Jezebel. He was 11. He never stopped. In 1968, he opened a store called Record Rama, and he made a decision that defined everything that came after. Every record he ever sold, he'd keep one copy for himself, one of everything, forever. By the mid-90s, Record Rama was doing $5 million a year in sales, and the archive behind it had become something close to unbelievable. By 2003, it held more than 2 million items, more than twice the size of the Library of Congress music collection. He estimated that 83% of the music in his archive existed nowhere else, not on CD, not anywhere, at any price. He believed he was the last man standing between all of that music and total disappearance. And then the CD era did to him what it did to everyone in the business. Sadly, Record Rama closed in February 2008. Then Mawhinney tried to sell his collection. This is where the story turns into something hard to listen to. He put the collection up with a minimum bid of $3 million, which was a fraction of what it was worth. A company called CD Now had offered him $28.5 million back in 1997, but went bankrupt before the deal closed. The Library of Congress opened talks, agreed on a price, then cut their offer in half and asked him to simply donate the rest. He told them they could never call him again. And then he waited. Years went by. Nobody came. The largest collection of recorded music ever assembled by one human being, and the world shrugged. In Sean Dunn's short film about him, Mawhinney looks straight into the camera, surrounded by the work of his entire existence, and says, "I've given my life to this collection." Eventually, in 2013, what was left of it, about 3 million records by then, was sold and shipped to a buyer in Brazil, a man Mawhinney had never met. He said he didn't know a thing about him. He just knew the records were going to Brazil. So who in Brazil was wanting 3 million records? His name is José Roberto Freitas, though everybody calls him Zero, a nickname from school. He was born in São Paulo around 1955, and collecting was in his family before he could even remember. When Zero was 5, his father brought home a hi-fi stereo that came packaged with 200 albums. A week later, he found out his mother had 400 or 500 records of her own, hidden in the house. Music was everywhere in Zero's early life. He bought his first record at 14 in 1964. By the time he left high school, he had amassed around 3,000. He studied music composition, then took over the family bus company and built it into one of São Paulo's biggest transit operations. And as the money grew, the record buying grew with it. But Zero Freitas took things to another level. He placed classified ads in Billboard magazine. The ad said, in plain capitals, that he'd buy any record collection, any style, and pay higher prices than anyone else on earth. And he meant it. He put scouts on multiple continents. When one of them found nearly 100,000 Cuban records in Havana, Freitas bought all of them. When Colony Records in Times Square shut down in 2012, he bought their remaining 200,000 records. In a 6-month stretch in 2013, more than a dozen 40-foot shipping containers arrived at his warehouse, a former candle factory in São Paulo. Each container held roughly 100,000 records. And yes, he's the man who bought Paul Mawhinney's life's work and shipped it to Brazil. His collection now runs past 8 million records. He pays a team of university interns to catalog them, 8 hours a day, and they're nowhere close to being finished. He says the records don't really belong to him. He says he's only holding them, and that one day the warehouse will become a public library of recorded sound that anyone can walk into. And here's the detail that tells you everything. A journalist once asked Zero Freitas how much time he spends each week listening to his 8 million records. He said he mostly listens to the radio. He's spent 40 years in therapy trying to explain his own collecting to himself. So you've got the man who couldn't sell and the man who couldn't stop buying. There's a third kind of obsession in this world, and it belongs to a musician from Detroit named Jack White. You probably know him from the White Stripes. What matters here is what he did when he looked at the vinyl revival and noticed something nobody else was acting on. The records were selling, but the machines that pressed them were dying out, and nobody was building new ones. The surge in demand had crashed straight into an infrastructure that had been left to rot. By 2015, there were only about 21 pressing plants left in the entire United States. Then, in 2020, a fire destroyed Apollo Masters in California, one of just 2 places on the planet that made the lacquer discs every pressing depends on. The backlog blew out to a year. Small artists were waiting 8 to 10 months just to get their record made. So in 2017, White opened Third Man Pressing in Detroit, and when he went to buy new presses, he found out something strange. Nobody made them anymore. The machines had to be custom built from scratch by a German company called New Build. They were the first newly built vinyl presses installed in America in over 30 years. He designed the plant himself, 8 presses, and he made them fully visible from inside his record store. You can stand there and watch your record being born. In 2022, he went public with a plea to the 3 major labels, Sony, Universal, and Warner. Build your own plants, he told them. He'd added presses, added staff shifts, and it still wasn't enough. The bottleneck was choking the whole ecosystem. The big labels were happy to sell vinyl. They just weren't willing to build the factories that made it. While the others collected the music, Jack White rebuilt the machine that makes it physically possible. The presses didn't exist, so he had them made. Which brings us to the question underneath this entire world. What's the most a single record can hold? Not the most expensive, the most loaded, the one with the most story pressed into it. For that, you have to go to Detroit again, but back to 1965. A Motown producer named Frank Wilson recorded a soul single called Do I Love You? Indeed I Do. It was good enough to release. And then Frank Wilson decided he wanted to be a minister instead of a star, and he asked Motown to pull it. The record was never commercially released. It should have vanished completely. But a single copy survived in the Motown archives, found by an archivist in the mid-70s, and from there, it slipped into the underground. Through a chain of bootlegging and theft and the obsessive northern soul scene in Britain, the record became a legend. Today, just 2 copies of the original are known to exist. The most recent documented sale of one of them was for over £25,000, making it the most expensive 7-inch single ever sold at auction. It's been used in a KFC commercial. Bruce Springsteen covered it in 2022. The man who made it spent decades trying to keep it buried. Only 2 copies survived. And it's the man who tried to erase it, whose name is now spoken with reverence by collectors who'd give almost anything to hold it. And if you think that's the ceiling, it isn't. Ringo Starr's personal copy of the Beatles' White Album, the very first one ever pressed, stamped #1, sold at auction in 2015 for $790,000. So here's what we keep coming back to. A vinyl record is a physical scar. The music is literally a wound cut into plastic, and a needle reading that wound out loud. Every pop, every bit of surface noise, is the record remembering being touched. Zero Freitas owns 8 million of them, and mostly listens to the radio. Paul Mawhinney saved 2 million, and almost nobody wanted them. Frank Wilson made one and spent his life trying to make it disappear. None of them were really collecting records. They were collecting a way of holding on to time. The music's available everywhere now, instantly. So the object can't be about the sound anymore. It's about the proof. Proof that a moment happened, that someone chose it, kept it, carried it through a life. The world told these people the thing in their hands was worthless. They held on anyway. And it turns out the world was wrong. It usually is about the things people keep. What people keep discovers worlds like this one. A different object, a different community, a different story hiding in plain sight. Because some things are worth keeping.